Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Love Learns. We're back again with the Perfect Match series. As you can hear my voice, there's a bit of like cold, not sure what's actually going on because it's like very hot outside. It's lovely summertime, but I've managed to catch a cold. So my voice is going to be all over the place, but I thought I still had to give this breakdown because like the more I watch Perfect Match, the more I feel like there's more to talk about. So last week we spoke about Dominique and Brighton, and I'll link that up here somewhere so you can watch it. But when she was talking a lot, she kept on referring to her going to therapy and her going to therapy, and I was like, another person who says they're going to therapy a lot in the season is Harry, and he's very problematic. So when I was watching it, I was like, maybe we should do an episode on Harry as well. As I said in the last episode, this is a reality show and it is heavily edited. So all the analysis that I'm doing is based on an edited show, so I don't have all the information and I don't really know these people either, so I can't give you any like backgrounds on why they do what they do. These are all speculative, and yeah, it's good information because you can still see signs and things that they do within certain situations, which can also give us some information on how we could react in certain situations, and how it's problematic and how it's useful. So I thought better for me to pick a few things that I noticed about Harry that stood out to me, and I think the more each episode I saw something that stood out to me. I was like, okay, but I'm just going to pick a few things so that we can just kind of see some highlights. If there's anything that you notice that you see throughout the series that I have not mentioned, I'm happy to have a conversation about it in the comments. I think 2 weeks ago someone called Ava commented on the Penelope and Colin video, and it was a good conversation. She also had insight on them, so if you haven't checked that out, you could go check that out on the Colin and Penelope episode, and if you just scroll down you'll be able to see her comment. So yeah, I really do enjoy, I know I said this at the end of every video, but I really do enjoy getting to chat with you guys and seeing your perspectives too. So if you do have anything to add to the conversation, please just pop it in the comments below. So let's get started on Harry. Okay, so from the beginning, the first episode, he is like made to be the main character. He's giving main character energy because he's the last one in, and as soon as he walks in, there's like the theme tune is kind of like he's a boss, like it's giving I have arrived. And as soon as he walks in, everyone's kind of like, oh god, it's Harry. So that means he already has a reputation, which does not precede him very well. We have Xanthi saying like, girls be warned. He also says about himself that like in the last season he dated three of his exes were on that show. So we see like he knows the network, the Netflix network very well, and he's dated quite a few of them. And he also says that he hopes he doesn't like end up going on dates or being in the house with people that he has been with. So he's already like set himself up as already, I have a history. But in his VT, he also says he's been working in therapy, wants to get married. And when I hear people say, I go to therapy, sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a good thing. But then you have to ask yourself, what made you go to therapy? Like, what was the aha moment that made you go there in the first place? 2, like, what have you learned about yourself so far? And what has changed in that time? And also, how has it like informed your future self? Like, how is therapy helping you to get to where you are? Like, what are your goals for therapy? Because some people say they're going to therapy and it doesn't really match the output of what's happening. And when I started watching more and more of Harry, I started to realize he sees his problematic side and he wants to change, but I'm not sure if he's doing it for himself or if he's doing it because he feels like it's a way for him to say, well, I've done all these bad things in the past and it's been documented because I'm on reality TV, but I'm working on myself by therapy. So kind of like a band-aid on a huge wound. And some people will do that, of using therapy to manipulate you to think that they are doing the work, where really they're just showing up, saying what's happening, but not really changing their actions based on what they're saying. So we see the words coming out, but the actions aren't matching. And sometimes it does take time for the people to get there. And depending on how long they've been in therapy, someone could have just started and is still working out what their goals are, what they want from therapy, what they need to work on in therapy. But if someone's been in therapy for a long period of time and they haven't been able to spot the changes within themselves since they've started, or they can like verbalize it, but you're not seeing the actions of it, there's probably some more work that they're not doing within therapy, because therapy is something that you need to commit to. You need to put your all into in order for you to get the maximum out of it. The therapist cannot do the work for you. They're just here to guide you and shadow you into those places in order for you to get the aha moments. So if certain things aren't coming up into sessions, you're not going to move forward in this, like in life, because you're not presenting the therapist with the information that they need in order to give you a wider perspective of what's going on. But yeah, it was a very interesting start to the series. But when he walks in, he ends up matching with Elise and they get on well. But I think with their relationship, it's very physical. It's very much like, I don't think he was very much attracted to anyone else, but he liked Elise's vibe. Elise was also very into him, so it kind of, they matched. And whilst they matched, they also went on, in the first episode, they did the challenge together and they end up winning the challenge. So they're very, they work well together within like the team, but there's no real, there's like a lust, but there's no real like, we don't see much deep conversations or anything like that to kind of see, and they might have it outside of the show, like outside of the filming time, but we don't see any like real like getting to know each other like on a deeper level. And then we fast forward to the next episode where we see him talking to Elise about like his needs and what he needs from the relationship, and we see him starting the conversation about love languages and what his love language is, and how one of them is physical touch and he doesn't feel like that needed being met. And Elise tells him like, I don't know you that well enough, and there's also a lot of rumors and lots of speculation about you in this world of Netflix. So like, I just want to take it slow and get to know you, and then maybe we can get to that level. But then he comes back defensively and says, well, like, why are you being judgmental? Because based on what other people are saying, not what I'm showing you. And I think that's when he said that, it kind of reminded me of, I'm like, he might be using the therapy label as I'm working on myself, so give me grace. But at the same time, there's no accountability in, okay, I know people are saying this, but I am working on myself, and if you want to take it slow, then we could take it slow. But it still seems to be at his like, I need to be fulfilled in some way, and I don't feel like I am being fulfilled. So I'm just going to kind of let you know that I'm not getting what I want, which he does, and ends up like getting into a little bit of a heated argument with Elise, but kind of dismisses her points and kind of like, okay, let's just match, because you're the only one that I can match with anyway. If that's the way it felt like he could only match with her because everyone else kind of had their things going on within the house. So it was kind of like, okay, let's just match for now. So it felt very much like a placeholder, and I knew that as soon as his type came into the house, he would definitely revert to his usual type, which in the beginning he tells everyone, like, and everyone knows my type just because of the type of girls that I've dated based on the show, on other Netflix shows that I've been on. So you see him slowly switching off, and you see him also slowly weaning himself off of Elise, which with time you start to recognize, okay, this isn't it. But I was glad that Elise like stuck her ground, didn't like try and please him in a way that would compromise her own values, because she knew what she needed in order for her to get closer to him physically, but not give away too much that she felt like she was betraying herself. So I'm glad she stuck with her guns. But the fact that she stuck with her guns made him detach from the situation emotionally. So yeah, then we go to episode 3, and then we start to see, we see that he's sent on a date with Jessica, but he doesn't know Jessica because Jessica's from Love is Blind, and her episodes hasn't been released at the time of filming this, so he hasn't really encountered her within the Netflix world. So this is his first encounter with her, and she fits the physical look of what his type is, which is brunette hair and petite. So he's kind of like, oh wow, this is the person that I've been looking for. This is the person that I see. And when he's finally given what he wants, I think it starts to show, okay, he's very much interested in her because of the way she looks. But the more they talk, she's very much looking for certain qualities in a man, and she's very open and honest about them in the first date, about what she needs. She's like, it's not really much about the physical look of a man, it's more like if they can make me laugh, if I can have like that friendship with them. And we very much see that happening in the conversations with throughout the series, where she's very much focused on her relationship being built in a way that like she can introduce her daughter into that relationship, and also be a good example for her daughter as a healthy relationship. And the more you watch, the more you realize like she goes on and off the path throughout the show, but she's always reminded that she needs to focus on what would be best for her and her daughter, and not just her. So she's not just dating for her, but she's dating with a holistic mind, with a holistic idea of what family looks like and how she would want to raise her daughter, which I think also bites her in the bum a little bit, because she's giving this information to Harry quite early on. Harry also uses it, and uses it to kind of weaponize it a little bit in the future episodes, because you can see that she wants marriage, she wants that life. So he's frames himself to be the person for that picture, that future picture. Because he tells her, like, oh, I'm like ready to get married and settle down, and have kids. So he's saying all the right things, but those are all words at this point. And with time, you can work out if this person's actually legit talking about these, is really invested in these ideas, or if they are just saying those things to kind of love bomb you and get you into a place where you're like, okay, like I'm in love with this person, and then you find out actually these are all words, these were just all actions that kind of were surface level and not really deep enough for a real connection. And when he comes back to the house with Jess, Elise is still there. So he's gone on this date. Elise is in the house waiting for him to come back. And Elise really thinks that this is a relationship that's going to go forward, because he hasn't communicated that his needs are not being met, but he's also looking to explore other options because he doesn't feel like what he needs from the relationship is getting met. So instead of him having that conversation before going on the date, he kind of just goes on the date. So he comes back with Jess and realizes he's got what he wants in Jess. But instead of coming back and having a conversation with Elise, he kind of just like brushes her off and just kind of like avoids her. And I think it's just his style of avoiding conflicts, because he knows that he has to make a decision, and he's already made that decision, but he doesn't want to let down Elise because he knows that that's going to hurt her. But at the same time, not having that conversation is still hurting her. So it's very interesting to see that play out. And you can see Elise also getting frustrated because she sees him interested in her because she knows his physical type and Jess meets all that criteria. But instead of her getting angry at Harry, she gets angry at Micah, who sent Harry on the date. So we can see that there's a displaced anger, rather than her just confronting Harry and being like, okay, you haven't been very clear with me. So instead of her directing it to him, she's trying to probably save that relationship, so directs the anger to Micah. But that's a whole nother conversation in itself. And if you'd like a video on that, please just let me know and I can make a video on that. But I think the more we watch Harry interact within the house, the more we realise the respect that he had for Elise at the beginning of episode, at the beginning of the episode 1, it starts to dwindle because he feels like his needs aren't being met. And in this case, when he does finally get to sit with Elise, it's kind of like, it's not going to work kind of thing. And it's very dry and very cold. And it doesn't come across as he even had feelings for her in the first place. It does really feel like she was a placeholder. And now that what he wants is in the house, he's going to go with what he wants and leave her hanging. And the more you watch it, the more you realize, ooh, this is problematic. But at the same time, you want to make the change. Like you want to give him a little bit of grace because he hasn't really, they are on a dating show. So they are trying to get to know people, but the way he went about it was the wrong way. So that was the first kind of like, this could have been dealt with in a very different way. And if you were in therapy and you were committed to changing, not that you're going to be perfect, but if you're committed to changing, maybe start taking accountability for your own actions in those situations, and then try and rectify things during the time that you're working with it, because it might not come out perfect, but at least you're trying to at least take your make your part known in it. But within that conversation, it's very much, I'm not getting what I need, which is like you handing the control to the other person. So it's like, if you do this, 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 and this, which is manipulation, I will stay with you. But if you don't do this, this, and this, I'm gonna leave, and which you did. And then we get to they're matching in the end, and he ends up matching up with Jess, and they kind of go off and then spend majority of the show together. And then we fast forward into episode 4, where they wake up and it's a new day, and everyone's like they're revealing the matches of who's in the like who's matched up the night before. So he comes down with Jess and he sees Elise, and he's like, oh my god, my problem is still here. And the fact that he called Elise a problem, I was just kind of like, oh god, this is not going to end well, because it shows that he using her in order for him to stay in the house and be safe in the house. But then as soon as he found what he needed, he kind of dismissed that, hoping that that dismissal would end with her going home so that he can fully focus on Jess. But if your problem is still in the house, that means you have to still face the reality of you didn't deal with the situation the way you should have. And that makes the accountability part very evident, that you haven't really taken care of that situation. So instead of him kind of pulling her aside and being like, okay, like, I know it didn't end the way we wanted it to, but like, I'm here to find love, you're here to find love, so let's kind of sit down and like, let's kind of make sure we're on the same page and we're not going at each other, but we're focusing on what we're here for. No, he just tries to avoid her in any way, shape or form. And Elise is also trying to like get her own back, because she could have left the house, but that's her own thing going on. But with him, you see it very much fueling his kind of like dodging the situation. And as I said, we probably don't see the whole picture because we're not watching all 24 hours of them being in the house. But we see that when I saw that incident, I was like, this might be problematic for him and Jess's relationship, because he hasn't really dealt with the problem. So yeah, that episode kind of pulled that out. I didn't like watch too much of him in episode 4, but then when we go into episode 5, we see a lot more of him and Jess like chatting and getting to know each other. And then we see them also doing the challenge together in episode 5. They don't win, but they're very open to like learning things about each other, and them just relating with each other in like within the house and the tasks and stuff. But towards the end of the episodes, we start to see Tom, who is Harry's friend, close friend outside of the house, talking about like people not being genuine in the house and not being there for the right reasons, and projecting his kind of like frustrations onto the situation in the house. But then he mentions, if everyone in here is being genuine, why are you here, Harry? Which throws Jess off, because it's kind of like, if your best friend doesn't think you have the best intentions here, why are you here? Which, as we see play out, he starts to like spiral and just wants to hide away and go to his room and kind of just shut down, because he's realizing like his past is always going to be his past and it's going to catch up with him. And the more honest he is about those things, the more it's probably going to help him get there. And his intentions might be to be in a relationship right now, because he's trying to get over that past that he had, but he needs to be open about his past and not always shut it down when people see it as a concern within the relationship, because people are saying things around you anyway. So if you have that conversation with her about the situation, you're opening up any questions, you're being very open about any questions she has. It doesn't feel like you're hiding anything. You're being very open and honest with things, and that makes it easier for someone to kind of allow you back into their space, allow you to be yourself with them. And the more I watch him, the more I realize he is stuck between two parts of himself. The part that was the past, where it was very promiscuous, very for being a troublemaker, and then the future self that he wants to have, which is settled down with like a woman who's going to be his wife and have kids with, and really have this boyfriend girlfriend relationship, no longer just a sexual thing, but more of a connection and a commitment. And I think he's still trying to navigate how to move from that old persona to this new persona without fully understanding that transparency and honesty is probably the best route into getting into that situation, because everyone else knows what's going on, and you need to be very honest about where you are at. And even if you said, you know what, I do want that in the future, but I'm still trying to work out how to get there, and not acting as if he's already arrived in that season of, okay, I'm getting a girlfriend to become my wife, but just being honest and saying, like, I do want that for my future, and I'm going to make some mistakes because I'm still working out how to work with my old self and work with the ideas and the reputation that I've created for myself, and how to navigate that through getting into a secure and happy relationship. But he doesn't get there yet, and it's a very tricky part, because I think for most people, when we do want to make a transition within our lives, we tend to see what we want and try to fake it till we make it there, and sometimes that works, but in some such situations, when you are in a relationship or an environment with other people watching you and who are connected to your future self, you need to be very open and honest with them about where you are, and be honest with yourself as to where you are at that moment, so that they can keep you accountable, keep you supported, so that if they see any patterns that don't look right, they'll be able to question it and be able to push you in the right direction. And I think for Harry, he still hasn't worked that out yet. So he's bouncing between the two parts of him that aren't really giving him that he wants, like the two parts of him that are him, like his old self and his new self. And we see part of this happening when he's talking in the next episode, when he's talking to the VT about Holly, when he sees her come into the house, and he just shares information about her that she probably didn't even know he was going to share. Harry just openly says, oh, like, had an interview with her and I slept with her after that interview, without thinking about how she would feel about that information being out there, and about how she's also on a dating show, so she's also trying to find her new partner, her perfect match. So you're also making that information a little bit out there and not available for her to kind of like also create her own narrative and be honest about things, about what's going on in her life, which kind of shows that he's like so self-centered sometimes that he doesn't see his own self within these dynamics, which is kind of giving a little bit of some narcissistic traits that he does show, because he's not really thinking about other people. He tends to think about himself first, and then when he realizes that it's going to hurt him in the future, then he tries to backtrack or tries to clear up things, which, if you start to see those kinds of patterns with someone you're dating, it's probably a red flag that they're not really thinking about the relationship. A lot of the time they're thinking about themselves, or they're not their first instinct isn't to think about the relationship, it's to think about themselves. And if they are in that state, it could also be because they're in survival mode. Some people have grown up in survival mode, so always tend to go into a self-preservation mode rather than think about the whole holistic idea of what they're doing. But the more you start to work out that, okay, this is a trait that I have and I need to constantly work it and be intentional with that workings, I think that's when you start to see the person being very open and thoughtful about other people. We continue to see Jess and Harry kind of move through the show. We don't see much of them throughout some of the episodes. We just see them in challenges. We don't really see much interactions. Only like towards the end of the night when they're about to match, we see conversations being had with them. And a lot of the time we see Harry speaking to Jess in a way that's very love bombing, and he tries to paint the picture of what she wants based on what she said to him in the first episode. And she asks him, like, why do we match like every night? Like, why do we match? To kind of find out where his head's at. And his answer is, because I love you. And at this point, they've only been dating for like 5 days, I'd say, or been in the house for 5 days together. And there's no real conflict. There's no real understanding of who each other are. It's kind of like, and I get it, they're in this bubble, which it's a reality show, so they're just all immersed in this world, and they're with each other 24/7. But for someone to say they love them without knowing so much about them and how they deal with conflict is kind of like, we're not there yet. We need to figure out what's actually going on. And every time there is conflict that comes up in their relationship, he kind of like shuts it down, because he plays victim of like people just keep bringing up my past, keep bringing up my past instead of taking full accountability of things. So I think the more we watch their relationship, the more we realize there's also parts of Jessica who is enabling this kind of behavior with Harry, because she doesn't, when people do say things, or when things are questionable, she doesn't really question them towards Harry, because she knows what's going to come, because he's done it before where he plays victim and starts crying and hides in his room. So we kind of see that happening, and we see the dynamic like that they play in the dance that they play within their relationship. And then we get to the boy and girls' day out. So they all go to different villas. The boys go to a different villa, girls go to a different villa. And all the other past housemates who used to be in the house and those that have been put on the board before for potential dates all come and meet them. So the boys for potential dates go to the girls who live in the house, and the girls that have been on potential dates go to the boys' house, villa, where they're like hanging out. And for the very first time, we see Harry faced with not being with Jess 24/7 and her not being around to kind of monitor his behavior. And he says it himself, like, this is going to be an interesting day. This is going to be trouble. Because now he's no longer being monitored and like seen. The only people there are the boys who he can kind of blasé with and cover up for him, and the girls who they have no loyalties to the girls in the house, so they're just gonna do whatever they want to do, kind of thing. So when you see that, you kind of realize, oh, okay, this is him just like doing his thing, and this is the real test as to if he can hold everything that he's been promising Jess, because now there's no one watching you. even though there's cameras around, there's no one really watching you. That will definitely keep you 100% accountable. And when he is put in that position, we see him going back into his old ways, flirting with the girls, carrying Melinda to the bathroom, carrying her around the villa, and not really taking accountability of his actions in all of that. And not really thinking about Jess. He's just thinking about his pleasure and his time away from the house and having the best time that he can have. So when this alleged, he kissed Melinda, and Melinda says, so we're not going to talk about the kiss, and he's just like, why are you lying, and fully gaslighting her. And at this point, you don't know what's true because it's not been told, like the whole story hasn't been told, but we know, like, from watching the full series, he's gaslighting her, and he's telling her she's lying about something that actually happened between the two of them. And it's kind of like, everyone else is like, we don't know what's true because we didn't see anything. But he and Melissa know the truth. And instead of him just saying, it was an act, like, I didn't mean to do that, that was me losing my head, I shouldn't have done that, Instead, he goes to full defense mode because he knows if this is being filmed, if Jess sees this, he has a chance of losing Jess. So he's not really thinking about Jess, he's thinking about what he's going to lose if Jess sees this, not more, if Jess sees this, she's going to feel bad. It's more, if Jess sees this, she's going to feel bad and she's going to leave me. Not that she's just going to feel bad. It's more, she's going to leave me. So I need to cover up my wrongs so that I am in the best position to keep Jess, because that's what I want. Which is given narcissistic traits, as I said. And he's also gaslighting Melinda, because Melinda's like, wait, like, this, you're fully gaslighting me. We've had a kiss, just own up to your rubbish, own up to what you're doing, and then we move forward. Like, don't act like I'm the one making things up, because it's not me making this up, this is reality. So Melinda also gets frustrated, and then in the next episode we see Melinda telling Jess everything that happened on the weekend away, and it's all crazy from there on. Like, Harry's avoiding, as he does when he realizes his mistakes are catching up with him. He avoids situations because he doesn't know how to self-regulate in those situations, which we see throughout the season. Like, his ability to self-regulate when things are going wrong is very hard for him. He only knows how to co-regulate with someone, but when he's on his own, he either like avoids the situation or he goes into full panic mode and his whole body starts to react. Either he's like throwing up or he's crying and very much in his sad state, because he's realizing what's happening as it's going along, and he can't like calm himself down to kind of think rationally, and he's thinking from a very emotional place. But when this is all happening, Jess is still backing him without knowing the full details, and he continues to lie and even calls Melinda a clout chaser because she's wanting her 15 minutes of fame, which is a very interesting way to put it, because you're kind of like, okay, fine. But at the same time, we need to figure out what's actually going on here. So yeah, these are like throughout the season, we see him doing things to kind of benefit himself and what he would like from the season, from this series. And it's kind of like, what you're doing isn't helping you, but isn't helping the future you that you've mentioned you want to have, but you're still doing them. So what do you actually want for the future? Like, what is your actual future? Like, what is the actual future for you? But he doesn't ask himself those questions often enough for him to be intentional with what he's doing. He's very much an impulsive, I'm going to do what I want in this moment kind of thing, instead of thinking about the bigger picture and how it's going to affect other people around him. So yeah, Harry is a very interesting character, and I know I've just spoken about him in a broader sense, and we see in the finale, he writes a letter to Jess to explain everything that happened, and how sorry he is. And I don't even think he tells the full truth in that letter. I think what helped him get to that point is because he was out of the house and him and Jess had broken up, they had left the house. He had time to kind of realize, like, there's no cameras, it's just him. He started to realize what his future, what he really wants for his future. And he knows it's Jess, but the pressures of the cameras and the rest of the cast isn't fueling his actions. It's more, I'm by myself and I need to work out what I want, and I know I want Jess. So I need to own up to what I've done and take accountability, because that's what I've been learning in therapy. And I don't know if he had a conversation with his therapist or not, but I think when he moved out of the dynamic of the house and everything that was, so is because it feels like it's more of a pressure cooker when you are in the house, because you're competing to also win the show, but at the point of being ushered out of the house, you're no longer competing, so there's no pressure on you doing things in order for you to stay in the house, if that makes sense. So I think from there I kind of realized, okay, yes, the therapy is working, but at the same time there's certain things that he's doing that is hindering his progress within therapy. And yes, there's certain times where you do work in therapy and then you need to go into your old environments to kind of test how far you've come. But it's not really, it's kind of like you have to have a long amount of time in therapy in order for you to gain the strength. And even in therapy, you'll be having like small experiments in order for you to build tolerancy to the normal world that you'll be in. And I think when he was in the house, he was also drinking a lot more, which can also derail your kind of progress in therapy. So it's kind of like starting to see like what kinds of patterns you are picking up. So I think him watching this back will probably be a good way for him to relearn some of the things that he's done, and what kind of triggers him, because you can look back and see, okay, I didn't deal with this too well, but I could have dealt with it this way, and giving him new language for those kinds of scenarios. But I think fully plummeting yourself into something like that when you don't really have enough like exercise with those tools can make it a little bit harder for you to kind of go into that full immersed and high pressure environment. So I think with therapy, you need to also be careful with the kind of environments that you are leaving therapy into, because sometimes those areas, some of them you can't like hide from, like if it's a family dynamic and you live at home, you can't hide from those things, but you can start to pick up those tools that you are discussing in therapy and working on them within those environments. Whereas this TV show, he maybe could have put it off for another year or two and then realized, okay, I've built up enough tolerancy to like my patterns and what I do so that I can go into an environment like this and not result to my old self and go back to my old self, because it takes a long time. You've built your life on these patterns which have created like these neuro pathways in your brain. So your default is those pathways, and when you start therapy, you start to build these new pathways, but if they're not exercised enough, those pathways aren't exercised enough, they are not your default. Your default are the 30 or 25 to 30 years, or however old you are, those pathways are more dominant. So in survival mode or in pressure cooker situations, you're going to go to those default mechanisms. So maybe recognizing, what is my default mechanism? What is my default reactions to certain things, and how can I spot them before I go into it? Because we always have patterns before we get to that action. How can I how can I spot something and be aware of it and move past that? But therapy is a very interesting world to work with a therapist and actually get to these points. You start to recognize what you need to do within yourself. And I really do enjoy working with clients with such behavior issues and trying to understand like how that came about, where all his where this defense mechanism of lying and defending himself came from, and why there's a sense of self-sabotage in certain situations, and trying to work out what's rooting those things, how to root those things out so that we can create new pathways in order for those to be the more dominant pathways. But I wish Harry all the best, because I think now he's seen it on paper, and his therapist can also watch with him and try and work out what's going on and talk through things and understand what actually is happening within that relationship between him and Jess, and what he wants, what he saw from that relationship that he wants, and how to avoid self-sabotaging in the future. And not all of us, not the normal human being won't have a camera chasing them around all the time, filming these things, but we also have our own perspective on those things. So I think understanding how to maybe make notes on those things and be more aware of when you're doing certain things to help you kind of move forward in that aspect of things. So if you are looking for a therapist and you want to work in these areas, I'm happy to sit with you guys and chat. Just send a message or a DM on Instagram, and we can have a chat about how to set up a free consultation call and just learn more about how best to help you out. But on that note, guys, I want to end this episode. If you've got to the end of this episode, thank you so much for watching and for getting here. It's as I said, it's a pleasure like interacting with you guys and chatting to you guys. So if you do have any other questions or anything you want to do, please do subscribe and like and comment so that we can interact with each other, and I can be more visible to what you guys are doing. But thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, and I really appreciate you being here. Take care, guys, and I'll see you next week.